I'm really excited to introduce you to Love Life. Love Life was my oldest volunteer. In fact, when I did the initial plaster cast, she was already 91 years old. What an amazing woman. Now, when I do the plaster cast, it does mean people have to disrobe down to their waist. And when I put the plaster cast material on, it's cold and it's wet and it's sort of not the nicest of feelings. It's not a day at the spa for sure. Anyway, as you can see, Love Life is a tiny, tiny lady. So she was getting pretty cold at the time of the casting. So we put a blanket over her back and tried to tuck it into her trousers and tried to keep her warm. And as I was doing the plaster cast, she'd take big breath in, big breath out, big breath in, big breath out. And each breath meant the plaster would crinkle up and crinkle down, crinkle up and crinkle down. And I'd mentioned that the more she could stay still, the better the cast would be, which would make for a much, much cleaner and better sculpture. We carried on a few more minutes and she would breathe in and the plaster would crinkle, breathe out and the plaster would crinkle. And finally her daughter who was there with her said, "Mum, stop breathing." It took us a moment. There was this brief pause where we all just thought, what? And then had a good laugh about it, which made the plaster crinkle even more, I should tell you. The last thing I wanted was Mum to stop breathing while I was doing the cast. At the time of casting, I always ask women, why did you volunteer to help the project? What I really mean is, why did you volunteer to do this? Well, Love Life said simply, I love to live. I've had a good life. And she told me about having tea with the Queen and drinking from beautiful cups and all kinds of exciting stories because she had had quite the life, I can tell you. So when it came to making the clay sculpture, I really had to think about how was I going to represent her as I met her in that short time on this piece of clay. And I thought of tea in the garden with the Queen. I thought of fine English teacups and saucers. And there's a big rose connection in this family. So I thought about those lovely little teacups with the tiny, tiny roses on them. I thought about how I would draw them because I always draw roses, but I draw them a little bit differently to how they're presented on the teacup. And what I managed to find is this lovely fabric with teeny weeny little roses. So I took that fabric and I cut it out into shapes of the rose I normally draw. So if you look carefully at those blue lines, you'll actually see my rose and the leaves. And then on the fabric, those teeny weeny roses, just like those teacups she would have used at tea with the Queen. At every single exhibit, Love Life inspired so many people. First of all, they would comment on her courage to take part in this project at 91 years old. And she did have her own personal reasons for doing that. But she changed the lives of so many people with this clay sculpture. First say, oh, 91 and she volunteered. And then they'd read her story and her wisdom and her advice to us all. Love life. It's as simple as that. And up here you'll even see I wrote it on her sculpture. So we can't possibly forget. With all those exhibits and all those presentations, everybody got to hear the message, love life. And I still remember it today, 23 years on. When things aren't going the way I'd like them, I remind myself, love life. Just love life. So I'm excited today to let you know that Love Life is actually going home to her family. As you know, as I have closed the Beautiful Women Project exhibit, these clay sculptures are all up for adoption. Where I could, they're going back to the original women. After that, if I can't contact the family or they're not able to take it, I put them up for adoption so people can just pay the shipping and own one of these sculptures. I wasn't sure what would happen to Love Life or where she would go. But just as I was about to put her up for public adoption, her family reached out, and so this week she'll be shipped off and be back in their care. What a wonderful way. And you know when I found out that this was happening? On the 23rd anniversary of the Beautiful Women Project, and when I did the very first cast. What a lovely circle. So I'm very excited. Love Life will continue to inspire through the project and all through her past experiences. And now she'll be going back into the arms of her family. I hope this story inspires you too, to love life. Cheryl-Ann Webster, Sculpting Emotions, creator of the Beautiful Women Project.